Welcome to a demonized new episode of the Demonic Compendium, the show where I discuss the mythology, design, and game history of your favorite Megami Tensei demons. Isn't it interesting how the same thing can be called something completely different depending on where you are? Like how some people refer to soda as pop. Well, sometimes we see some of that with mythological figures, so put on your mask and get ready to dance, because today, we're talking about Gurulu. Gurulu, sometimes known as Gurula, and sometimes either of those are followed up with a Yaksha or Raksha, is a giant eagle in Sri Lankan mythology, and is essentially viewed as a deviation on the Hindu figure Garuda. Since the name Gurulu Raksha roughly translates as bird devil, people commonly assume this variation of Garuda to be a much more demonic figure, which more or less lines up with how he's typically viewed in Megaten. And by the way, this bird devil is not to be confused with the Ulama, otherwise known as the Sri Lankan devil bird, which is a popular cryptid in Sri Lanka. Gurulu is frequently depicted in Sri Lanka as a mighty eagle whose face is decorated with various snakes or naga that it wears like a trophy. Despite some sources viewing Gurulu as devilish, he's a popular figure and is featured on many intricately carved masks worn during traditional dances to actually ward off evil spirits. Gurulu's Compenium entry from Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance refers to him as a demon that takes the shape of a giant bird in Sri Lankan mythology, also known as Gurulu Yaksha. It is believed to be a derivation of Garuda, the spirit bird of Indian mythology, which is in ideological opposition to its place in Sri Lankan mythology, in which it is interpreted as a demon. Hey, if you like what I do, please consider commenting, subscribing, maybe even checking out the Patreon. Trust me, it all does help a lot. Thank you so much. Moving on. Design-wise, let's actually take a moment to address something else I'm sure you're all very curious about. Why, for so many years, was Gurulu called Gurr in the franchise?
Gurr?
Well, from what I can gather, it all just stems from a mix-up in romanization. See, in Japanese katakana, Gurulu is written as Gururu, since Japanese frequently uses the R characters in place of foreign L's, like how Luigi is Ruigi. Another common thing is that in many Japanese words, the U kinda becomes a silent letter, ranging in ways like how we just say des instead of desu, or how we don't call this character Yosuke, but simply Yosuke. So when presumably Kaneko himself was writing down the English names of demons in his art books, he romanized Gururu as simply Gurr, and it's a safe assumption that this book may have been consulted when it came time to localize the games. So there we go.
Gurr, reporting for duty.
Now, before I get to the design most folks know, I do want to take a moment to highlight Gurulu's early design, where he was depicted much more human-like with dark skin and winged arms. He has a shaved head adorned with 6 jieba, or self-inflicted burn scars, that once adorned the heads of Buddhist monks and Krillin. I can't say for certain, but I wonder if this design is in reference to Gurulu being a variation on a Hindu figure in a country where Buddhism is actually the more prevalent religion. But that brings us to his main design, which is, as the history suggests, a variation on Garuda. In fact, they frequently utilized the same model. Many early 3D games had Gurulu, or Gurr, as such a copy of Garuda himself that he lacked most of the skeletal features we see in Kaneko's artwork. And truthfully, I love Gurulu's design. I'm a big fan of the exposed bones, especially the horned bird skull as a direct symbol of him being a bird devil. And hey, I like how Kaneko even gave us a bit of fun color theory in this design. While Garuda is traditionally seen as a yellowish orange, Gurulu often utilizes the complementary color on the color wheel with a more purplish blue. I really like this element. And I could save this for the game history part, but I feel like I should get this out of the way now. It took so long for us to finally get a game that actually managed to do everything right with this demon, at least in English. The first game to actually give Gurulu the correct model that matches his artwork was the mobile title D2, but he was still referred to as Gurr in that game. Then, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster was the first English game to correctly call him Gurulu, but since it was a pretty bare bones, no pun intended, remaster, it still used his old model, where he lacked the skeletal features we see in his artwork. Believe it or not, it wasn't until Soul Hackers 2 in 2022 where a game had the proper model and the correct name together. They've managed to continue getting it right in games like the Persona 3 remake and SMT Vengeance, so I think it's safe to say it's all sorted out by now. As far as game history goes, Gurulu has actually given us quite a bit to discuss, so much so that the first thing I want to talk about isn't a game at all, but a manga. In Death Dement, Shin Megami Tensei DSJ Another Report, we follow the crew of the Gigantic after they crash in the Schwarzwald. After donning their Demonica suits, the group is attacked by a Gurulu who even rips the head off their commander before it itself gets eaten by a Wendigo. One of the crewmates, Dahlia, comments that she recognizes Gurulu from stories of her mother's home country of Sri Lanka. In Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, the Demi-Fiend can only obtain Gurulu by conducting a sacrificial fusion. By sacrificing a tyrant demon in a fusion that would result in Suparna, they can make this Sri Lankan bird devil. Seeing as how Suparna is actually another avatar of Garuda, even evolving into him in this game, it's a very fitting fusion requirement to get Gurulu. Speaking of fitting fusion requirements, the MMO title, Shin Megami Tensei Imagine, requires obtaining a special item drop from the demonic bird and then specifically fusing Garuda and Rakshasa. Gurr appears in both Digital Devil Saga games as part of scripted battles, where a brute transforms into one on the boat in the first game, and the Embryon has to fight off a duo of them in the airport in the second game, so I guess they're just really into travel. While absent from the original game, Gurulu appears in Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance as a punishing foe in the Shinjuku region of Dot, and serves as the target for the subquest The Disgraced Bird God, where a Senri asks you to kill him. Like other similar quests, killing Gurulu before accepting the quest leads to an extra bit of dialogue where the Senri is surprised that you actually did it. Finishing this quest unlocks Gurulu for fusion on the Canon of Vengeance, but no such restriction exists to fuse him on the Canon of Creation path. And on the subject of Shin Megami Tensei V Vengeance, here is a real sentence that I'm about to say. In May of 2024, to help promote the release of Vengeance, Atlas West teamed up with heavy metal band Slipknot to create detailed recreations of masks for certain demons, including Gurulu. Nope, that still sounds made up to me. Now, for some reason, despite their mythological connection and the fact that they do frequently appear together in games that have this mechanic, Gurulu and Garuda have never had a special conversation with one another, as of the time of making this video anyway. The closest they had was a fusion spell in the early Persona 3 games, where the protagonist could cast Raktapaksha by having Gurr and Garuda together, which has a chance of knocking down all foes while removing any active buffs they may have had. Completing Elizabeth's request to cast this fusion spell rewards players with the winter outfit for Junpei. Elizabeth even comments on this costume choice by saying how easily Gurr and Garuda's wind would knock his hat off. For completely unknown and probably very stupid reasons, this fusion spell was one of the several cut from Persona 3 Reload, despite both figures still being in the game. Even in the episode Aegis DLC, which gave Aegis a few unique fusion spells from the older games, this particular one was still absent. But hey, at least they managed to correctly call him Gurulu in Reload. Gurr was absent from the original Persona 4, but got added to Persona 4 Golden as a member of the Jester or Lust Arcana. And I'm gonna take a shot in the dark here, but with Atlus's recent trademark for a Persona 4 remake, he'll likely either be in that game with his proper model and name, Gurulu, or, much less likely, be mysteriously replaced with a different figure. Either way, whatever happens is gonna be worth commenting on. In Soul Hackers 2, one of Ion's missions, Retrieve Needle Crystalloid Gamma, involves running around the third floor of Melody's Soul Matrix and just collecting 8 of the same item from your demons, and completing that unlocks Gurulu for fusion, I guess. Okay. Oh yeah, also, he's just like, here? Like, he just hangs out outside the Goma Circus? Yeah, alright, this is a weird note to end the episode on. And there you have it, Gurulu, the demonic deviation decked out and dressed in distal death. Did I leave out something you thought was important? Was I just plain wrong about something? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to let me know who you'd like to see me talk about in future episodes. That's going to do it for this episode of the Demonic Compendium, and I will see you next time. But be careful while you rest that a demon doesn't take over your body.